If you're even a casual listener of pop music, you probably recognize that guitar riff as the intro to Maroon 5's ubiquitous 2018 hit, Girls Like You. It features a really signature at this point filter sweep across the second half of the riff. That's exactly the kind of effect that's very easy to automate and dial in the studio, but oftentimes can get left by the wayside live in favor of just playing it straight because it can be tricky to automate those sorts of effects live. In the case of Maroon 5, the song was just getting played straight without the effect until we decided to leverage the power of the Acoustic Preset 3 to copy this effect exactly from the studio into the live environment. I'm going to show you guys exactly how we did that. I'm Cooper Carter, here for G66 and Fractal Audio, and this is Fractal Friday. My favorite and the most exciting part of my job day to day as a production consultant working with the bands that use Fractal Audio Systems gear for their live show is taking the stem tracks and the parts from the albums and finding out, working with the band, how to translate those live. It's a lot of fun to dig into the minutia of how the parts are made, how the tones came to be in the studio, and then figuring out how best to translate that into a very different environment. To get the exact same sound live that you would have in the studio, it might take very different settings. Or you might be trying to do something entirely different in the live environment than you were in the studio. Either way, it's always exciting to get into. This is a perfect example here with Maroon 5's Girls Like You of a part that for a little bit, we just weren't doing live because we hadn't gotten around to really translating the effect from the studio into the live environment. And then one day, James Valentine gave me a call and said, hey, I really want to try to get this part going. I've been trying to do it with a wah, but it doesn't sound the same because obviously on the record, it's a filter sweep. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, in the studio, it's pretty straightforward to get a filter automated to sweep. You just draw an automation curve, and then as you play back the track in your DAW, it will sweep the filter. Live, it's a little more involved. For one thing, you have to decide who's going to do it. Is front of house going to sweep the filter? Are you going to sweep it with a pedal and then it's not repeatable every night? So I was really excited to dig into this little problem, and given that the Acoustic Preset 3 is so powerful, I had a pretty good idea of how to get it so that it would be 100% repeatable and sound just like the album every single time James played the riff. So I started off with James's live acoustic preset, which is almost an exact copy of the acoustic preset that I built way back in Fractal Friday number 3. So I knew the first thing that I needed to do was add a filter block, and listening to the record, I knew that the easiest type of filter to use to recreate this was going to be a low pass, which they likely used in the studio. A low pass filter lets only the frequencies below the set frequency pass through. So I'll turn it on here and you can hear as I sweep it down. We're losing all of the high-end frequencies. They're just being shelved right off here. So I can go ahead and turn on an LFO here, or a low frequency oscillator, which is just going to sweep this frequency up and down. And I'm going to set the mod frequency all the way up so that it goes all the way to the top and comes back down to the value that I have here, which is about 100 Hertz. And if I listen to the guitar, I can hear that it's sweeping about where I want it to. Now, it's not in tempo, it's not in time, and it's repeating over and over. But the filter is sweeping down to where I want it to, about around 100 Hertz. So the trick now was to get this sweep to trigger, to run all the way down, and then to stop at the bottom. Now, I could get this over with very quickly and just attach a modifier to the frequency, select a pedal, and then use the pedal to sweep between the top range of 20K and then down to our value of about 100. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, that wasn't really an ideal solution because you don't want to have to recreate the same exact sweep in time. And I wanted this to be the kind of thing where you hit one button and the sweep is automated exactly like you hear it on the record. So instead, I turned to one of the most powerful modifiers and what I believe is probably one of the least understood and underused modifiers, the ADSR. So I'm going to go ahead and put our minimum here to around 100 where we want it, so that's the lowest that this will sweep. And we're going to go into the controllers tab here, and we have ADSR 1. Now, some of you may already be familiar with an ADSR, maybe from using a synthesizer. They're very popular on synths. ADSR stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. And as you can see here, you have a curve that attacks all the way to the top, decays to a set point, the sustain level. Here it's 50%. And then it releases and goes back down to the bottom, and it does so in a set amount of time. So we have the frequency of our low-pass filter here tied to the ADSR. 50 milliseconds is pretty quick to hear what this is doing. So I'm going to go ahead and extend all of these values to a second, just so you guys can hear more or less what's happening here. I'm going to play, and when my playing breaks this threshold of minus 30 dB, the ADSR is going to fire or trigger, and it's going to modify our frequency knob based on this curve. So when it fires, it opens all the way up to 20K. It comes down to 50%, it sustains, and then it releases, returning all the way back down to 102 Hertz, which is the minimum that we set here in our parameter range. So now all I have to do is define the shape of the curve that I want it to sweep at, which is that I want it to start sweeping immediately when I play, and I want it to sweep gradually down. So I'm going to go with the smallest attack of 1. I'm going to go with a decay of 10 seconds. I'm going to go with a sustain of 1 millisecond and a release of 1 millisecond. Then I'm going to set my sustain level at 0, and I have a perfectly linear curve that just runs from all the way open at 20K down to our 100 Hertz bottom level. So as soon as I start playing the riff, the ADSR will trigger and it will start sweeping. So I've got it triggering, but we're not really hearing the same aggressive sweep that we hear on the album. So what I need to do now is go into the Q of this filter and raise it up a good bit, let's say around 4, so that we have a nice spike in the filter there. And let's hear what we have now. That sounds a lot more like the record. But now we have an issue. I want the filter off for the first half of the riff, and then when the second half of the riff starts, on the downbeat of the third measure, I want the filter to start sweeping. So I'm going to start playing. And by the time I get to the second part of the riff, the filter has already swept most of the way down. Ultimately, I decided that the solution was 2 different ADSRs. So I'm going to copy channel A of this ADSR to channel B, and I'm going to reset channel A to its default values. Now what I have here now is an ADSR that, as I play, is constantly running very quickly. So as I'm playing with this filter block bypass, that ADSR is constantly firing, but I'm not hearing it because, again, the filter is bypassed. Then I create a second scene. We're going to call it Sweep Acoustic. And on this second scene, I want to use channel B, our second ADSR, with our long sweep and the filter unbypassed so that we hear it. So in practice, when I play the riff on the main acoustic scene, my ADSR is constantly resetting as I play, so that when I do switch to the second scene, the ADSR is reset at the top of the curve as opposed to being somewhere in the middle of the long sweep. And then back to scene 1. And to make this even more foolproof, I can put the attack, the decay, the sustain, and the release all at 1 millisecond and allow re-triggering so that my entire A-channel ADSR is firing so quickly that you basically can't even see it move. That way, the millisecond I switch to scene 2, I get the filter firing from the very top right on the downbeat. And then of course, on the default FC scenes layout, we have scene 1 and scene 2, and you can very easily switch to scene 2 on the downbeat of measure 3 and back to scene 1 on the downbeat of measure 5 of the song. And the real beauty here, especially with James's rig, is that he can either switch these scenes himself on the downstage pedal board. His tech Mike Buffa can switch the scenes on the duplicate pedal board on top of the rig on side stage, or the playback system that keeps almost all modern bands on time can send out MIDI CC messages that will change the scenes automatically via playback. So main acoustic sound, and then switching over to the sweep scene. I hope you guys enjoyed this little look behind the scenes of one of Maroon 5's tones. This was a really fun little problem to solve, and it's cool that night to night, James is able to play this exactly like the record, and it's consistent and repeatable, which in so many ways is really the power and the strength behind the Acoustic Preset 3 and the FM9 and the FM3. And using these units live, you can program in exactly what you want, and then every single night, it's exactly the same. You never have to worry about it changing on you, and you're able to nail parts over and over and over. Look out very soon on Fractal Friday for a full rig rundown with James Valentine and Jesse Carmichael from Maroon 5. We're gonna tour through a lot of different tones that we've created together, and they'll play you a ton of riffs from their absolutely ridiculous number of huge hit songs. It's gonna be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for those. Coming very soon. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do make sure to thumbs up and subscribe to G66's channel. Leave me a comment in the comment section below letting me know what you would like to see on a future episode of Fractal Friday. And as always, if you guys want to dig even deeper into your Fractal Audio Systems unit, whether that's the Acoustic Preset 3, the FM9, or the FM3, make sure to visit classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Fractal Audio Masterclass series. For all things Fractal Audio, keep it right here on G66, and I will see you guys next week on Fractal Friday.